I walked through the door, and I was hit with the smell first. I couldn't quite place it, but there was the stink of something akin to rubbing alcohol mixed with the smell of an unkempt bird cage. Crossing into what was once the living room appeared to be turned into a makeshift operating room. Various household items had been repurposed with helter-skelter genius into medical equipment. A dining table had become an operating table. A vacuum with tubes had become some sort of suction pump. A chandelier had become a bright lighting fixture, and so on. Knives and scalpels were strewn across the floor, chairs, and countertops, all of them crusted and caked brownish black. Juxtaposed against everything were feathers and bird carcasses. Various plumage floated on the ground and air, while bird body parts were pinned on the walls as if a flock of various species of bird had been massacred in the house and pinned up for presentation. Bird shit seemed to cover everything. The main centerpiece of this bizarre scene was the body. A black tarp covered it, but it was clearly a body. My curiosity got the better of me, and before one of the officers could stop me, I pulled the tarp to see the person underneath. I knew it was far too big to be Avila. My stomach lurched as I saw what was left of a man. The face was unrecognizable, as it had been perforated beyond recognition, as if someone had taken the sharp end of a clothing iron and bashed it repeatedly into the face. Blood pooled in the pits among the gore-ridden head. There was no way to tell who this once was. I could only assume this was her father, Jeremy Arthur. When the police had broken down the door, they had found him like this, dead, on the ground, his face bashed in. I dropped the tarp and asked immediately for her. The reason I was here. I was led through the house to the second floor. Like the bottom floor, it was covered in bird viscera and feathers. At the top of the stairs, a room was open where multiple officers stood, looking uncertain. I walked in, noting the toys on the ground and clothing meant for a little girl. The place was in complete disarray, and again, bird feathers and shit covered everything. When my eyes went to the bed, something akin to horror, concern, and abject sorrow gripped me. There she was, wrapped in a blanket, head down, with a knife to her neck and the teddy bear I had given her poking out of the top. Her hair was long and unkempt, draping downwards and obscuring my vision of her face, save for a single eye burning with hatred. I shuddered. The idea of such a young person to be in this position made my mouth go dry and my stomach drop. I felt such fear and pity for her. "I'm here. They said you asked for me." She merely nodded. I forced a smile on my face as I stared directly into that fierce, burning eye. "I see you still have the teddy. He looks a little dirty, though. Do you think we should go get him cleaned up?" The single eye glared at me, but I saw that knife slowly moving away from her throat. "We can take him somewhere safe and clean. Can you put the knife down?" She moved the knife away.
"Can we fly there?"
she asked quietly, something muffling her voice, making it echo.
"Daddy said I could fly now, that I was free."
Confused, I started to reach out for her, wanting to hug her to remind her that she was safe and to take the knife from her. "We're close enough that we don't need to fly." What happened next will forever be scarred into my memory. She flung the blanket off, dropping the knife and bear, her hair flinging back as she let out a terrible screech.
"Daddy said I could fly now!"
Had I not known whose house this was and not seen the bear, I may not have recognized the person before me. The skin of the arms had been stretched wide in between the forearm and shoulder, creating a disgusting flap. A curved rod protruded from her wrist, about the same length of her arm, ending in a point. Feathers were stitched into every piece of exposed flesh, and more clung to a disgusting discolored skin and gauze mesh between the rod and her forearm. She had spread her arms as wide as the bizarre surgery could let her. And her face. God, her face. Attached to her mouth, no, replacing her mouth, was a metal beak, sharp and pointed. Where it met her face, crusty skin and metal showed that her flesh was starting to grow over it. Metal wires and rods attached to the sides of her beak disappeared into her flesh. Her eyes burned with anger, confusion, and dare I say, madness. What's more, her metal beak was covered with blood and tiny strips of flesh. Fresh, shivering gore dribbling off that point. She looked like a bird of prey. The moment she dropped her guard, in her screaming, the officers lunged. One grabbed her by the back of the head, another grabbing her by the legs, and two grabbing at her wings. She thrashed and screeched, screaming that she could fly, screaming for her daddy. I walked backwards, terrified and saddened, as I watched them drag her out towards a readied ambulance. I slowly followed behind the procession, slow and stupefied, watching her writhing form paraded through the disgusting house. As I was at the top of the stairs, I looked down at the corpse of the man with his destroyed face. It clicked then. That beak was what had made those terrible wounds. She had attacked him. In God, I hope that she had not eaten him. But her frail body told me that she most likely tried. I did not sleep that night. I had considered following to the hospital, but opted against it. I wanted desperately to make sure that she was okay, but I couldn't. I admit I was scared of her. She had destroyed that man on the ground. She was ready to kill herself in defiance of the police that were there to help her, and her terrifying display. I went instead to the police station to tell them everything I had witnessed. As I sat and spoke with a tremble about my experience, the officer received a phone call. His eye looked at me with a worried, nearly terrified look. He shakingly replaced the phone to the receiver. What is it?" I asked.
The girl is gone.
"What the fuck do you mean, the girl is gone?"
The ambulance never made it to the hospital.
"Didn't it have a fucking police escort?"
No, I was waiting to tell you until after the debrief, but they discovered the body was not the body of Dr. Jeremy Arthur. It was a vagrant. They broke off to assist with a manhunt for him.
I slumped in my chair. My body shook. We had tried to save her best we could, and we failed her. No, I failed her.
Are you okay?
The officer asked. Yeah, I feel like I'm gonna puke though. Do you mind if I hit up the bathroom?
Go on. I'll be here.
I got up and made my way to the bathroom where I retched. How could I have failed her? I should have done something earlier. I should have seen something sooner. I washed my face as I berated myself. Then, my phone rang. I practically jumped out of my skin. I reached for it and saw it was unlisted. I wanted to think it was a telemarketer. I wanted to think it was a misdial. I knew better, though, as I answered. Hell?
My dear little girl is going to be free. You told her once that should she ever be in trouble, that you would be there for her. And you were. She was so terrified of those officers. She didn't want them to take her away from me. Had you not come, she may have slit her own throat out of such terror. And I thank you for that. You saved her little, innocent life. She will fly. And you have inspired me, Mr. Delapour. You have inspired me.
Doctor,
After speaking with my daughter, and her showing me how caring you all are to the other children, I realized that I have been selfish. Why should only my little girl fly when so many other children are bereft of happiness like she was? All the suffering children will soon be free of their shackles. They will fly, just like my little Avila. They will soar high in the sky after I have molded their flesh into the perfect avian like my little Avila.
I was choked for words.
Hello, Mr. Delapour.
Avila, please, you need to go to a hospital. Your father is not well, and neither are you. Where are you? Can you tell me where you are? Can you do that for me, sweetie?
Mr. Delapour, I'm free now. I'm going to fly just like Mommy is in heaven. And Daddy's gonna help all the little kids who are sad and angry, just like me. And I'm gonna help him too. I'm gonna have friends to fly with. We couldn't have done it without you. Thanks, Mr. Delapour.
Avila! Avila!
Goodbye, Mr. Delapour. I have a flock to craft.
Then he cut the connection. Imagine all that. Imagine hearing that. Failing so terribly to save and protect someone that not only did you fail to protect them, but you created a monster dead set on destroying the innocents you are trying to protect. Imagine that. The failure of the peacekeepers, the law, who are inept to stop those monsters. Imagine that. Do you remember the image I put in your head in the beginning? That sweet, innocent little girl. And all those monsters and failures converging down on her. I knew then what I had to do. I had to save them from him. I had to save them all from the shortcomings of everyone, including my own. I would keep them safe from monsters like the Good Doctor, safe from the failures like our society, safe from the monstrous failures like me, failures like you. By setting them free before people like us could hurt or fail them. And so I started with the next little girl who came into my office.